he had to know if they could deal with the pressure. The other side of it was, like any good bully, he enjoyed it. You could see, even in sort of the way he discussed it. And but it had a purpose, and it also should be said when I tell you this, that Jordan also showed in lots of ways he was capable of great compassion.
The OTB Podcast Network.
Okay, so really looking forward to this next chat. 25 years on, it's the anniversary of a team lots of us extremely familiar with of late, courtesy largely of the Last Dance on Netflix. In particular, I'm talking about the 95-96 Bulls team. And they're a team very much in the conversation for best of all time. They were record breakers. The big record, most wins in the regular season. So this was in many ways the peak of that Bulls era. The LA Lakers of 1972 had been top dogs with 69 wins in the regular season. And then the Bulls of 95-96 broke it with 72 wins. So to discuss, I'm very happy to say we have a man who spent plenty of time thinking about Michael Jordan and the Bulls. He is Roland Lazenby. He is author of Michael Jordan, The Life. He was also author of Bull Run, the story of the 95-96 Chicago Bulls, the greatest team in the history of basketball. So Roland, great to have you with us. Thanks so much for the time.
Thank you, Joe.
The context, I suppose, for this 95-96 season, certainly from a Michael Jordan perspective, and therefore by extension the whole team, is the death of his father and his retirement, which utterly shocked everyone.
There's no question of that. And I think that additional context is that Michael Jordan returned to the Chicago Bulls in the spring of 1995. It was a very exciting time. The whole national news focus was the return of Michael Jordan to the Bulls, and to be there covering all of that as a reporter was great fun. And it was so much fun, we really didn't understand the context of it, that Michael was still very much grieving, still very much possessed of just this incredible level of anger. And then the Bulls got into the playoffs, and there was this great belief that here was Michael Jordan, the miracle maker. Although he had missed most of the season, had come in mid-March, there was this belief that he was going to take the Bulls right away to another championship. And they got into a series with the Orlando Magic, which had the former Bull Horace Grant playing for them by then. They had Shaquille O'Neal. And Michael did something he'd never done. He got into the key moments of that series and he turned the ball over. And he his mistakes led to in a large part, to the defeat of the Bulls. What wasn't known at that time, and what wasn't part of the conversation, was that as a senior in high school, with all of this drive to win a state championship finally, Michael had his Laney High School team from Wilmington, North Carolina, in the state playoffs. And at that time, basketball had no shot clock. It had no three-pointer. And with a little over a minute to go, his team had a 6-point lead. There's no way you lose a game with a 6-point lead with a minute plus to go. And Michael made a series of blunders. He had a couple of offensive fouls. He fouled out of the game. His team lost. There was an NBA player, a future NBA player, playing against him that day. He lost to a team, Michael did, that he had beaten all season. And it was a team of his friends from across the city of Wilmington. And they spent the summer going at each other on the courts. And one of those players was Kenny Gattison, who went on to play in the NBA. And when I was writing Michael Jordan, The Life, Kenny Gattison explained that, yes, his high school team had gotten this great victory when Jordan blew it. But Gaddison had never in all the years since, and they were friends, and they would see each other all the time on the NBA circuit. And Michael Jordan, of course, was an immense trash talker. He would let you know about everything. And Kenny Gaddison would not dare even mention that loss. Wouldn't even smile at him and say, hey, what about the time we got you in the biggest game? And Kenny Gaddison said, there was no way I was ever going to say that to him. Mm. In fact, Kenny Gaddison said, I wish we'd lost to him. It was that uncomfortable. And so here Jordan makes a similar type of burden. I remember walking down the hallway after that game, and here comes my friend Tex Winter, the assistant coach for the Bulls. And he says, man, I've never seen anything like that. The first thing we had to do is go to Michael and tell him, you're still our guy. You're still the guy we rely on. But I had never seen the Bulls. They'd always been so confident. And I'd never seen them so shaken. So when Michael gets to training camp the next fall, he's a maniac. That's when he punches out Steve Kerr, starts that fight, and that whole season is fueled by that anger and energy he has.
It's there's an interesting line in The Last Dance where his personal fitness guy says to him that evening of the defeat to Orlando, presuming Jordan was going to take a couple of weeks off or whatever. When I see it, drop me, give me a call and we'll hook up and get going again for next season. And Jordan said, I'll see you tomorrow. I will see you tomorrow. And that drive, that frothing at the mouth, pretty much kicked off from then. This is the infamous summer as well, isn't it, Roland, where he's filming Space Jam and he says to Warner Brothers, yeah, I'm going to need you to build me a court. And the Michael Jordan Dome was built.
Yes. And, the fact that he was going back the next day, he had just gotten back to basketball. He had gone to a baseball body. He went all out to try to play the American sport of baseball. And so he has a lot of work to do, and he knows it. And he was really aloof. And, there were two things going on there through this whole period that began to mark those final seasons. The sports writers, we would come in and talk to him about sports related things. Meanwhile, the adjudication of his father's murder and all the different things going on about that were playing out many days in the news, major headlines, and he would go home riveted to that. But it was like a bifurcated world. We were never going to discuss, and probably were not allowed to discuss, matters of the family's victimization. Matters of the trial. And I used to cover murder trials and as a newspaper reporter, and the amount of animosity and anger and every human emotion in those courtrooms, it's unbelievable. And so you can imagine this man of tremendous passion, unprecedented. The reason we're having this conversation is that he had a level of passion. When did Irishmen care about American professional basketball? When did Americans care about it? It was not a top agenda item in this country or any country. Now, there were a series of things that made that happen, but Jordan blew it up in the minds globally.
And Roland, just remind us, how did that case conclude? Did they ever get a satisfactory outcome to the murder of Jordan's father?
Well, yes, except for the conspiracy theorists. And of course, there are appeals and things, but having covered police and that kind of stuff. It was a fairly standard case. There
Mm.
was lots of evidence to attach the two young men. One of them turned evidence in the trial. There have been appeals and things, but they were both
Yeah.
convicted.
And is Michael Jordan generally satisfied that justice was found?
That's not the kind of question I've ever posed to him, and I frankly have not seen a lot of his commentary on that. I
Mm.
don't think, it's not the kind of situation where American journalists can sit down and sort of poke at his raw emotions like
Mm.
that. Maybe there has been that. Maybe he's felt comfortable talking about that with a friend like Ahmad Rashad, but you'll have to forgive me. I've spent the last 2.5 years writing the life of Magic Johnson, another very big American basketball icon.
Mm.
And so I'm just switching right now I literally finished the manuscript on that 20 minutes ago. So
Oh, wow.
I'm flipping gears here.
Well,
And
congratulations.
so, but I don't believe, I don't think he's expressed a lot more than his pain.
Okay. Well, congratulations on Magic Johnson. We'll talk to you about that when it's out. That sounds great.
Thank you.
You mentioned there the Stevie Kerr bust up in training. So, Kerr said that when he came back post Space Jam, after having these amazing, it seems, pickup games well into the night and then hitting the weights and then getting up at 4 or 5 a.m. for Space Jam and somehow managing to maintain the schedule. I mean, it's just insane. Like, he's not mortal in so many ways. He's even more possessed when he gets back to training. Punches Stevie Kerr in the face. Feels dreadful about this. Feels really bad about this. In Jordan's own words, he found himself looking around, and I think only Scottie Pippen survived from the first championship win. And he felt there were quite a few fellas quite happy to saunter around in their Bulls uniform thinking, well, we've made it. And Jordan almost looking at them saying, you haven't done anything yet.
Michael could blow up anything in his mind to really stoke his fire. He knew how to do that. He was the master at putting himself in what here in America we call the zone, that area that you flow into magically at times as an athlete, where everything is almost dreamlike and you can just do it all. Well, as George Mumford, the great sports psychologist, said after working with the Bulls, he was stunned at Michael's ability to project himself to that level routinely. Most people, I've hit it a couple of times in my life, once in a college football game. And it is a wonderful feeling, but it's rare. But Michael could do that. And, those guys were scared to death of Michael. Michael was a tremendous bully. As James Worthy described him, his college teammate at the University of North Carolina, who was 2 years older than Michael. And James Worthy, of course, is a great American professional basketball player with the Lakers. He went on to do that. But he told me, Michael is a bully and he bullied me. And frankly, Jordan had... and I think we saw this in Last Dance. Jordan had a bullying style of leadership, and all of those new Bulls who were now on the roster, who had not been there before, were wholly and completely intimidated by him, as Steve Kerr explained to me in our many interviews. And if Michael perceived them as this or that, well, there's a space, there's a place in Michael's mind where reality and his desire to push himself, where things sort of escape the factual world and become a function of whatever psychological device he is employing at the time. And so it's hard to tell. Those practices were closed. Were those guys giddy? I'm sure they probably had some giddiness. But Steve Kerr, his memory of it is that they all sort of backed off away from Jordan. They were afraid of even speaking to him. He was that kind of, and I mean, he had been intimidating figures in the NBA, all of those players. And you think about the National Basketball Association, you think about what African Americans have been through in this country for centuries. And basketball is one of the places where a Black male suddenly is able to walk beyond all of the constant everyday character assassination that American culture provided relentlessly. I mean, it's hard to describe. I grew up in the South, and I came in, I was born in 1952, and I came in an age, I remember being a very young child, and all of the Black folk, if they dared to eat from a local restaurant, would have to go around to the back door and be sold food out the back door. And the level of, and this was not just the South, the level of dislike, the caste system was brutal and remained brutal and destroyed families and lives. I saw it with my friends once the schools integrated. And so here's basketball, and the men on the court in the NBA. That was a very mature, that was a very strong, that was it's hard to describe. I think it's different than any level of athlete we've ever really concentrated on the planet, to have this oppressed people suddenly have this area of endeavor and the freedom it brought. And Michael Jordan came into that crowd and intimidated. Like I said, Kenny Gaddison wouldn't even bring up that high school loss. He intimidated, and these were huge, oversized, exceptional athletes, very proud people, and Michael Jordan cowed so many of them. Nightly, you could see it. So you can imagine the sort of roster the Bulls had then. These were a lot of timid guys and role players. And so Jordan was, there's never been another figure like him in American basketball.
By Jordan's own logic, Roland, there was a logic there. He was trying to build these guys up. He talks about it at length. He talks about Scotty Burrell and these guys, nice guys, talented guys. But if he didn't put them under pressure at practice, he wasn't sure he could count on them in the white heat of playoffs when their moment came. So he felt he was building them up. In the main, my sense from his teammates now, and we're talking here 25 years on from that phenomenal season, is they kind of get it now and they're okay with it.
I was there doing a book on the 97-98 season called Blood on the Horns. And between all the different inside, by then I'd been working with the Bulls about 6 years, and I had all this different information being fed to me. The Scott Burrell story was fed to me. That was not a public story. All of these stories about Jordan, this impossible person, the anger and the way he would ridicule and belittle people on the team bus, including Jerry Krause, that really played a huge part in the breakup of the Bulls. And that was one thing that really was sort of downplayed out of all the excellent work done for the Last Dance series. And it was really a function of this ferocity. And I had worked so hard to get the one-on-one time with Jordan. And Tex Winter, my friend, the assistant coach who had coached Michael longer than anyone, had spent so much time talking with me individually about all of this. And I would work, I'd get 3 minutes here, 5 minutes there, then 30 minutes away from practice. And so I suddenly started building this rapport with him. And I had to ask him, are you this evil son of a bitch? Are you this guy that will reduce anyone around you to a puddle of tears? And I had to figure out how I was going to say that to the great Jordan. And so I decided that I would couch it in the term that he was a great team leader, which he was. And I would say, you know, you get on that bus, you can be very ruthless, and people say you're difficult away from the public, and you know you'll do these things like you did with Scott Burrell. And he said, I can be very hard. And that's really when we sort of were able to, because this is not normal behavior. You'll have alpha males who run teams. We all know that. But at this level, at that level of sport, in the climate I just described previously about what the NBA means to American culture, it was not normal. It required some processing, and it still does, even after we've seen The Last Dance and had a year to ponder it. And so I had to ask him that, and he was comfortable explaining that yes, he had to prepare them. He had to know if they could deal with the pressure. The other side of it was, like any good bully, he enjoyed it. You could see, even in sort of the way he discussed it. And but it had a purpose. And it also should be said when I tell you this, that Jordan also showed in lots of ways he was capable of great compassion. Just don't expect it in the middle of the game on an NBA floor.
What was he like to deal with, Roland, during those years?
Tremendously charming. He charmed everyone. You know, and I don't know, am I allowed to say 4-letter words on this podcast?
We'll live.
The proposal for my Jordan biography began, it was called The Pig Fuck. And that was how the Bulls PR man Tim Hallam, described the crush of media around Jordan in the locker room after the game, the pig fuck. And, you know, you'd be in that pig fuck and everybody was just glommed onto him. He was Jordan. And he could really hold court. He had so much charisma and so much style. He'd be dressed to the nines before he ever came out there. And the Bulls PR people would say, we could do this with, you know, and today they don't put them there like that, a person of that stature. They put him at a table with a microphone and the media are at bay. But Jordan loved the pig fuck. He wanted to be in the center of that, and he really wanted that connection. Just as much as the media wanted it. It was something to behold, something to participate in.
Yeah, so it was symbiotic. He knew the game.
Yes, it was a tremendous intimacy that he wanted.
Right.
And it was part of the way he ruled the crowd.
And Roland, was he ever likely to call you up or catch you in a tunnel somewhere and say, "Oi, I saw what you wrote the other day. Don't you dare do that again"? Was he that type?
Never did that with me. I don't think he did. He would get mad.
Sure.
He got angry over my biography because it discussed some very difficult things that I was torn about whether I should include or not. And he shook my hand. And I would later find out that he was quite angry, but I wouldn't have known it from how he received me. And when I went to Charlotte games where he was the owner, I had always been, you know, I'm a book writer. I'm not in there covering games for the biggest daily newspaper in America or a TV reporter representing ESPN. I'm some auxiliary media guy. I have locker room access and I have a press seat, usually up in the nosebleeds. In the early days, often down on the floor, but as the crowd got bigger with the NBA, guys like me got pushed up to the top. But after the book came out, when I would go down to cover a Charlotte game, I would get top treatment from his PR people. So it was not like he was going to be petty. And Jordan is not going to stoop to do that. Now, Magic Johnson could do all kinds of things to engage the media, and usually for the benefit of a teammate. But and different players have different styles. But Jordan was very classy. I mean, he had tremendous charisma. It's why he had what Sonny Vaccaro, the great shoe guy from America. It's why Sonny Vaccaro identified him as the it factor, and worked so hard to persuade Phil Knight and Nike to give Jordan the deal they gave him. He just has tremendous charisma. It comes through in those Gatorade commercials, comes through in the Hanes commercials. It's one of the reasons he's one of the most successful pitchmen in the history of global marketing.
Yeah. What's your sense of him now? Is he a contented man?
I think he wants his basketball team to do better. He has lots of endeavors. He still cares about that. You know, it's a very different thing to be able to influence a team on the floor with the sheer will and skill that certain very few players possess. It's quite another thing to convey that. It's just like I tell when I taught writing at university here in America. There's a level of caring, a depth of commitment to what you're doing. And you can talk to writing students about it. It's sort of a journey of self-discovery. You can talk to teammates and officials, but you are the guy when you're a figure such as Michael Jordan or Magic Johnson or Kobe Bryant, who has that level, that depth of caring that even other great players simply would never have. That sense of urgency, that ability to be willing to piss off everyone around you and not care. And again, I would say it's about brass, but there are females who are athletes who are able to do that as well. But it is that rare human thing that allows a guy like Coach Phil Jackson to charge huge amounts of money to talk to business executives, because it's all the great mystery. Why are there those people who can care at that level? I don't know what they're doing. Now, some are just merely talented.
And is your point he can't get his team to care as much as he did? That's the frustration. Is that the point?
Yes, I don't think anyone can get the team to do that. Now, Magic Johnson's pretty good at it because he has this ability to really project how much he cares about them. That's why now Jordan has built a lot of his wealth with obviously the shoes, and then he was able to get that NBA team at a very good price, and then to see the value of NBA teams soar into the billions, and that made him a billionaire.
Yeah.
Magic Johnson left the game with probably a little under 100 million in wealth. And he's had to build his 600 million in wealth a much harder way, moving in and out of businesses. And I don't think at anything it's easy. Yeah. I don't care what human endeavor you target. The kinds of things that sense of urgency that I can talk about it till I drive you nuts, but it doesn't mean it's something that is easily transferable.
How did you interpret the motivation behind The Last Dance? I've seen few observers say maybe this was a certain effort to restate his legacy and his greatness? There are a few pretenders to the throne, obviously, LeBron in front of the queue. Is that what it was about for you, or what was he doing?
I was sitting with Michael in the rafters of the Orlando pre-draft camp, a one-on-one in 2008. We were talking about Kobe, but I was also talking with Michael a good bit about his life. He had once again given me time, and he told me something. He said, timing is everything, about the mystery of his own life. He comes along right when American television is gaining this power, when David Stern has come in to lead the NBA as commissioner, and they have all these strategies for Europe about projecting the NBA. They're dumping games. They're cutting the cost of American pro basketball so that in Romania you can see NBA basketball where you can't see local soccer, because it's cheaper to air an NBA game than it is to produce a local soccer game. And it's all this timing that goes into it. And Jordan was very aware of all that. There had never been an African-American male given the endorsement package that Jordan was given before he ever played an NBA game. And so timing is everything. And, I had a couple of friends who shot all this footage during the 97-98 season as I was writing Blood on the Horns. And so I was right there with them every day. They had camera crews everywhere shooting all the behind the scenes stuff. One of them was Andy Thompson, the uncle of Klay Thompson of the Golden State Warriors. And Andy had played basketball in college, and he's just a first-rate person, brilliant media guy, and he's there getting all this footage. He hardly gets mentioned in The Last Dance, but he shot it all. He was the field director of everything. And all of this was going on, and Andy, for 2 decades, had to sit on all of that footage. All of this footage of everything. And they kept offering Jordan millions to do it. And he didn't want to do it. And it was sort of, Andy, is not a person who wears his heart on his sleeve, but every time I would see him in an NBA locker room, I would say, Andy, are they any closer to making your film? He would go, no, they're not. And Jordan just wouldn't allow it to be released. But long before he knew there was ever going to be a pandemic, Jordan finally relented, and I think he got paid $20 million or thereabouts and which really it wasn't about the money. Now, of course, you and I, $20 million, and we would, I don't know, we'd live another type of life. But for Jordan, it was timing. And suddenly, yes, he has that ego. The game has changed dramatically. It would be like, let's say we want to remake soccer and we decide it's going to be better if it doesn't have a goalie. That's how I would explain it to folks in Ireland. And so the game of basketball has been remade in the 21st century. It bears little resemblance to the warrior struggle that Michael Jordan faced to do what he did, the very physical game that it was. And so, yes, he's a proud man. He wanted to make a statement about something that is no longer with us. In some ways, this is a eulogy for the American basketball he knew. It's now sort of a lightweight game of threes. They've removed just about all of the defense. There's certainly no hand checks. We used to bump the cutters. When I coached, you'd teach your people, they'd look for a player running through the lane and they'd slam them. And bumping the cutters was a routine part of, it's like a football drill. All of that's gone. None of it's allowed. You can't touch a player driving. I mean, we see all of these beautiful layups in the game. That would never have happened in the game Jordan played. You saw the footage of the Pistons and what they would do to him. And so, yes, he wanted that on display. He had no idea there was going to be a pandemic and that this docuseries was going to have the world's rapt attention. It has been astounding.
Astounding. Yeah, it's true. And so, like, would he feel the comparisons with LeBron, and would he be monitoring that and keeping an eye on who's regarded as the best, do you think?
You know, I don't engage in a lot of discussions about the best.
But does he?
I think they all do, because they are all immensely proud men. The ones who are the greatest, I mean, it's a night after night. It is not easy. Now the travel has gotten a lot easier. They're now in private jets. They used to be flying commercial. Jordan spent half his career crammed into a commercial flight with whoever else was there. Yes, all of the old timers, speaking generally first, are immensely proud of what they had. They're also angry that the world they have is gone. It would be, how would your soccer guys feel if suddenly there was no goalie in soccer? The world would be very angry, particularly the older players. And so Jordan was making a statement about his prowess, which is basketball in many ways is a mano-a-mano thing. And Jordan was the ultimate mano-a-mano guy. And so, yes, the docuseries was one of his mano-a-mano statements. Yeah. How does he feel about LeBron James? They have respect. LeBron James is a remarkable player. He would be great in any era. And so I think that, it's just nuanced is the best way I could conclude it.
Yes, no, that makes sense. And I suspect nuance will win the day with this next question, but we're talking here, the reason, if you're just tuning in, we're talking with Roland Lazenby, who's the author of Michael Jordan, The Life, amongst other books, is that it's 25 years since one of the great Bulls seasons, 95-96, they broke the regular season record with 72 wins. And that stood for a long time until the pesky Golden State Warriors came along, Roland, in 2016 and beat them by 1 with 73 wins. So I'm sure inevitable comparisons were made. Are the Bulls of 95-96 generally still regarded as the greatest of all time? I guess it's pretty difficult if the game is as different between 2016 and 1996 as you're suggesting. So would there be a consensus over in the States or very divided?
Always divided. If we ever get a time machine and we can go back and let them play it out with the players in their prime, Steve Kerr, of course, would be a reserve on that team and have to coach Golden State. So he'd be a busy man in that version of the time machine.
He really snuck up on the rails and had an unbelievable career, didn't he?
He did. And he's a great person.
Yeah. So there's no consensus. You'll have some saying Golden State, plenty saying the Bulls.
Oh, there are any number of people. I take the same approach. It's a little different with teams. I can talk about teams and label them. With individual players, I never get into comparison because it's impossible for one, and number two, who am I to say?
Sure.
I mean, I've spent my life working on this stuff, but I think that's the height of arrogance to sit in a chair somewhere and say, oh yeah, this guy's number 5 and this guy who played 18 years is number 6. I would never, ever think of doing that. The teams are great. There's a cluster of them. I've just finished writing about the Showtime Lakers with the great Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and all those fine players. And that Bulls team, I was dear friends with Tex Winter as a coach. I got to run the triangle. I started coaching a little bit just so I could learn it better to write about it.
Right.
And the triangle mixed with Jordan was a brilliant era. And they've basically outlawed it from the game today because if somebody gets it up and gets it running, it's lights out. Other team, it's just a brilliant means of controlling tempo.
Oh, is that right? So how have they outlawed it? I didn't realize that.
They shaved the timeline when you cross. It used to be 10 seconds, and the triangle is a 2-guard front instead of 1 guard. You're bringing the ball up with 2 guards. and you're setting up in that 2-guard front. One of the guards will cut through to the 3-point line on the corner, and it creates an unbalanced floor. And usually Jordan or Kobe Bryant is on the weak side,
Okay.
which is the weaker side on the balance. And they begin the ball movement that ultimately sets up a Kobe or a Jordan to attack when 3 of the defenders are on the other side of the floor.
Yeah.
And it's an old college offense that Tex Winter seized up from his college days and really began to modify and create this whole world. But first they cut the timeline so that you didn't have time to get into the triangle. And then they cut the offensive rebound clock from a new 24, which gave you time to set up and run the offense. They cut that to 14 seconds, which made it virtually impossible.
Wow.
And when people can't figure out why Phil Jackson's New York Knicks teams were so terrible, trying to run the triangle, they really didn't have the time. And the coaches hadn't figured that out yet.
Wow. That's amazing. So the triangle was so amazing. The triangle offense was so amazing that really it couldn't be stopped.
He won 11 titles. Phil Jackson was a guy who he's a breakthrough in so many ways. He was the Enlightenment, but he was such an arrogant guy. And he was like Red Auerbach, the great coach of the Celtics with Bill Russell in the 60s. Auerbach would light up the cigars. He was an arrogant guy, and he would rub everybody's face in it. And Tex Winter would tell me when Phil was rubbing everybody's nose in all this victory, he would go, Phil is doing this. It is creating a lot of animosity. And it also factored in that the suits who run the NBA are very bright. They realize, and it's been this way through pro basketball's many struggles in America, is the high scorers you have, that draws people's attention. The statistics and all of that, it gets the mathematicians involved, and they want to get analytics in it, and they're all, hovering over the game, and they've made billions by changing the rules. So I advise all you dear lovers of association football over there in Europe, buy your goalies a beer next time, because they may be the endangered species. I don't think it would ever come to that. I'm joking. But if you, let's say that the men and women who run soccer, run football in Europe and around the globe say, oh, we need to make more money. And legitimately, you can argue in any business, you need more revenue streams. Let's get rid of the goalie. We'll just do it as an experiment. We're going to have a lot more scoring. It's going to mean we're going to have pure defense. Nobody there with their hands catching the ball. You can see how that kind of logic takes root. And I don't think the passion of the world's football would allow it for a minute.
No, I don't think so. One last one, by the way, because it's very interesting that you say Jordan was never petty with you, and we don't have to get into the nitty gritty or the details. Give us a flavor of what you had written about in your biography that might have given cause for another man to say, I'm done with you. What were the things you were torn over writing about?
His sister wrote a book after her father died, detailing allegations she had made against her father for a long time.
Right. Okay.
And I wasn't sure what to do. When I went to the UNC library, they had the book in their special collections. And when you're a biographer and you can't just turn away from a major source, I didn't hype that. I kept all of her allegations to one little specific part of the book. But Michael was already, his family was already traumatized earlier, of course, 20 years before I wrote my book. But and I don't think I'll ever know the answer as to whether it was right or wrong, but she had made these allegations consistently. She expressed them well. You know, I had to respect that. I didn't say she was correct. I just said those are the allegations. They've been there. They cannot be adjudicated. They were never adjudicated, so we'll never know. It's a very difficult thing. Would make anyone angry.
Oh, I can well imagine. Listen, it's so great to chat to you 25 years on from the Bulls of 95, 96. Roland Lazenby, great to have you on. Let's chat about your new book when it gets sent off to the publishers and we see it out in hardback sometime.
Thank you, Joe.